I stood on the porch with a suitcase in one hand and my rain-soaked coat clinging to my shoulders. The porch light had already gone dark. Malcolm must have flicked it off when he slammed the door behind him. It wasn't cold out, not really, but I felt a chill settle in my bones. Not from the weather, but from the weight of what had just unfolded. 71 years old, 2 grown children, 5 grandkids, and a pension that had never failed to arrive. And still, there I was, outside my daughter's house in the drizzle, holding my life in 2 suitcases. It all started with a sentence I never expected, not even from him. "We're short on rent, Eleanor. You live here. It's time. Either start paying or move out." It wasn't a plea, it was an ultimatum. And it didn't come from Isla, my daughter. It came from her husband of nearly a decade, Malcolm, slouched in his grease-stained sweatshirt, occupying my late husband's favorite armchair like it had always belonged to him. At first, I said nothing. Maybe I misheard. Maybe it was a joke or just something that slips out when a man feels powerless, unemployed, embarrassed. But he meant it. And Isla didn't say a word. I should have seen it coming. For weeks, I'd noticed the signs, quiet conversations that halted the moment I entered the room, Malcolm snapping at the children, Isla rubbing her temples every time I asked if something was wrong. But nothing prepares you for the silence of your own child standing next to a man who just threatened to evict you and saying nothing at all. I refused. Not loudly. Not even angrily. I simply said no. "Malcolm, I'm not handing over my pension." I think my calm unsettled him. Maybe he expected tears or begging or for me to yield like I always had. But I was tired of softening myself for others, tired of shrinking to make space. An hour later, when I returned from the corner shop, my bags were packed and placed neatly by the front door. No confrontation, just quiet dismissal. Like I'd been a guest who had overstayed. I knocked. No one answered. I stood there, hand raised, listening to the faint sound of a cartoon playing inside, probably for the twins, but no one came. The bags weren't heavy. I've never been one to hoard things. Just a few outfits, a photo album, my Bible, a scarf my mother gave me the winter before she passed, and the pension card that had suddenly become someone else's prize. The neighbors across the street didn't look over. Or maybe they did, but rain has a way of turning drama into something private, silencing the spectacle. I dragged each suitcase down the steps and loaded them into the trunk of my car, still mine, still in my name, bought outright 7 years ago. One of the few things that hadn't been merged into theirs over the past year. I sat behind the wheel, unmoving. Not because I didn't know where to go. I did. My friend Marla had once told me, if things ever go sideways, come to me. No questions. But even with a plan, you still have to sit there, let the weight of it all land. Let it sting. Let it settle. I watched the wipers blur the rain across the windshield. Thought of the casserole I'd left in the fridge. Thought of the kids' drawings pinned to the door. Thought of how Isla used to climb into my bed after nightmares and whisper, "Don't tell Dad I cried." Eventually, I started the engine. By the time I reached Marla's place, the rain had thinned to mist. She lived just 20 minutes away, but I took the longer route. I needed the familiar curves of the road, the one I used to walk with my husband on quiet Sunday evenings. I passed the little gas station where I once locked myself out of the car and a teenager offered to call my son, only for me to realize I hadn't memorized his number. Marla opened the door before I knocked. She'd seen the headlights. Took one look and said, "So, it happened." I nodded. She didn't ask for details. Just pulled me into a hug and asked, "Tea or something stronger?" "Tea," I said. I always do. That night, wrapped in a blanket in her warm kitchen, peppermint in the air, I finally let myself feel everything. The betrayal, the loneliness, but also something else, a steady, unfamiliar clarity. For the first time in a long while, I saw the truth, not the version I'd made excuses for. Isla hadn't stood up for me. Malcolm had felt entitled to what was mine. And I've been living like a guest in a life that should have been my own. Something shifted that night. Not suddenly, not like a lightning strike, but like a door slowly swinging shut as another creaked open. Grief doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it shows up quietly in the folding of clothes you no longer wear. in drawers filled with someone else's toothbrushes. Noticing the silence in a room where laughter once echoed, that's how it felt after Owen died. It was a quiet Tuesday morning, just before breakfast. One moment, he was reading the local sports column at the kitchen table, and the next, he was gone. His heart simply stopped. I remember the soft clink of the spoon against his mug. I remember his fingers twitching once, as if his body hadn't caught up to the reality. And I remember the sound that escaped me, not quite a cry, not a scream. More like a breath that stretched too long, as if I was exhaling an entire lifetime. I was 59 then. We'd been married 36 years. 2 children, 1 mortgage, a single pension, and 1,000 inside jokes no one else would ever understand. Lena, my daughter, was already through her first marriage by then. The divorce came quickly, without much drama. One evening, she showed up at my door with a duffel bag and her 2-year-old daughter, Mira, asking if they could stay for a week or 2. Of course, I told her. We cleared out the guest room. That week turned into nearly 4 months. I didn't mind. The sound of little feet back in the house was comforting. Mira had this spark in her eyes, those uneven baby teeth, the way she wrapped herself around my legs when she got tired. She reminded me of Lena when she was small back, when I was still the one allowed to comfort her. Eventually, Lena found her footing again. She landed a job at a design studio, began dating someone new. I babysat when she needed me, made dinner when she was worn out, stayed up late ironing her shirts when she had early meetings. I told myself it was all temporary, a passing season. Then Malcolm appeared. Charming, I'll give him that. The kind of man who remembered birthdays and brought grocery store flowers, who praised my dry roast chicken like it was gourmet. He made Lena laugh, and after what she'd endured, that felt like something sacred. So, I overlooked the subtle things, the way he avoided serious conversations, how he never helped clear the table, the time he asked, mid-drink, so, "How much is your house worth these days, Eleanor?" I told myself I was being paranoid, that maybe I didn't want to share my daughter with someone new. But there's a wisdom that comes with age, a quiet, nagging feeling when someone's interesting you feels more like an audit than affection. Still, I stayed silent. I smiled. I let him take Mira to the park without hesitation. I thanked him when he fixed the leaky faucet, though Owen would have done it better. And when they moved into a larger place and asked if I'd consider selling the old house to help with the down payment, I said yes. Not because I trusted Malcolm, but because I trusted Lena or wanted to. The new house was bright, modern, filled with too much white. They gave me a key. Your family, Lena had said. At first, I visited now and then weekly. Then the visits stretched longer. Overnight stays became weeks, especially when Lena had to travel for work. The kids love having you here, she'd tell me. After I slipped on the back steps of my rental and tore a ligament, the offer came quickly. Move in with us for a bit. It's not safe to be alone like this. I hesitated. My life, limited as it was, had its own rhythm. My space, my solitude. But Lena insisted, and I wanted to believe she meant it. I moved into the upstairs bedroom, the one with the slanted ceiling and a view of the neighbor's pool. At first, it felt temporary. Just a few weeks of healing. Then more weeks. Then my mail began arriving at their address. My pension was redirected to their joint account for simplification. My things were slowly boxed up and stored in the garage to make more room for the kids. I didn't argue. Not even when Malcolm chuckled at dinner one night, "You ought to pay rent, Eleanor. You eat more than the rest of us combined." I laughed along. It felt safer than asking whether he meant it. Lena worked long hours. Malcolm did not. He bounced between ventures real estate, then something online, then nothing at all. He spent his days half watching sports and half scrolling through his phone. The children adored him. He was spontaneous, fun, the opposite of me. Slowly, I began to vanish in their eyes. When Mira turned 11, she stopped knocking on my door at night. When little Callan started school, he no longer noticed whether I packed his lunch or not. I told myself this was the natural way of things. Grandmothers are supposed to fade into the backdrop, offer advice when asked, step aside when not. But I wasn't a painting on a wall. Not yet. And I hadn't spent over 3 decades saving coins in tin cans to be told I owed rent in a house I didn't own. I hadn't walked my daughter through heartache and motherhood just to be cast aside like a piece of furniture that no longer matched the decor. Looking back, I can see it for what it was, a slow, creeping erosion. 1,000 tiny compromises, 1,000 little surrenders. Until finally, that one sentence shattered the illusion. We're short on rent. Give us your pension or leave. And I said, no, it wasn't the first time Malcolm had brought up money, but it was the first time he said it like that, like I was a burden, a balance due, something past its due date. The months leading up to that moment felt like slow erosion. And erosion's tricky, you rarely notice it happening. It's just a hairline crack in the plaster, a missing coffee mug, a sigh held a second too long across the dinner table. But eventually, things collapse. After I moved in, it was peaceful, even warm. Lena made space for my utensils in the kitchen drawers. The children left notes on my pillow, "Love you, Grandma," scribbled in thick, colorful markers. Malcolm was polite then, almost gracious. He joked about 3 adults under one roof, but always smiled when he said it. Then his job ended. First it was temporary, company restructuring. Then it was freelance work. Then consulting. And finally, nothing. He was home all day, planted in the living room, drink in hand far too early. The atmosphere in the house shifted with him. Lena picked up more hours. She became snappish with the kids, with me. I offered more help, took over dinner, picked the children up from school, washed Malcolm's laundry when it spilled out of the hamper. I believed I was easing the burden, supporting the family. But that's the thing about support. When it becomes invisible, it stops being appreciated. That's when I began noticing how Malcolm watched me when I walked into a room, not with irritation, but with something more calculating. Like he was measuring me against some invisible debt I wasn't aware I owed. Like he was keeping score. The first clue came when I overheard him on the phone, pacing in the kitchen, unaware I was nearby. She gets a pension. Of course she does. Full benefits. She doesn't even pay rent. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it, like I was freeloading. Later, while folding laundry with Lena, I mentioned it gently. Malcolm seems a little tense lately. She didn't look up. We're all tense, Mom. It's been a rough year. I know. If there's anything I can do, you're already helping. She cut in too quickly. Don't worry about Malcolm. He just carries stress badly. I should have pressed. I didn't. Then came the bill envelopes. Left conspicuously on the kitchen counter, rent, utilities, groceries. None of them addressed to me, but all placed like subtle invitations. One evening, Malcolm joined me on the porch, a beer in hand. The sun was setting. The kids were inside. Lena was working late. He didn't meet my eyes when he spoke. You ever think about what it costs to run this place? I didn't respond. I mean, you're here every day, using water, electricity, internet. It adds up. I cook, clean, watch the kids. I replied evenly. Sure, he said, but that's not rent. There it was. The next morning, I told Lena. Her response was barely a whisper. He's under pressure. We both are. I understand, I said, but I'm your mother, not a tenant. Her face didn't change, but she didn't stand up for me either. Not really. After that, things unraveled quickly. Suddenly, I was told not to touch the thermostat. Eleanor, this isn't your house. Setting it to 75 isn't cheap. Groceries I purchased were unnecessary. The milk I drank was for the kids. One day, my pension card vanished from my wallet. I later found it in the kitchen drawer. No one knew how it got there. Then one morning, Lena left a spreadsheet on the counter. Just so you understand what we're dealing with, she said. It listed every monthly expense. Rent, electricity, groceries, insurance. And at the bottom, in bold, was a line, household contribution, TBD, to be determined. The message was clear. Still, I didn't confront them. I held on to hope that this was just stress talking, a difficult chapter, nothing more. Then one night, during one of those dinners thick with silence, where no one spoke unless to ask for salt, Malcolm set down his fork and looked at me. Look, Eleanor, we're short on rent, and you live here. We need your pension this month. All of it. He didn't blink. I turned to Lena. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Didn't say a word. My skin went cold. Not from fury, from something heavier. Disappointment. A grief deeper than any rage. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, but no. That was the last meaningful conversation we had. The next morning, the house was colder. The air tighter. Lena barely spoke. Malcolm slammed drawers. The kids were rushed upstairs before I could even say good morning. That afternoon, I came back from the pharmacy to find my bags waiting by the front door. 2 suitcases, my umbrella, and my folding cane propped up like a message. I knocked. No one answered. The porch light was already off. The upstairs bedroom had once been Myra's, back when she was little, before she'd outgrown the unicorn wallpaper and moved downstairs. When I moved in, I tried to make it feel like mine. A few family photos. My favorite pillow. A blanket I knitted the winter after Owen passed, the one with the lopsided corners, because I cried through half of it. But it never stopped feeling like borrowed space. The kind of room offered with a smile and the words, "Stay as long as you need," but always shadowed by a silent expiration date. When I first arrived, still limping from the fall that fractured my ankle, they were generous. Lena cleared a shelf on the bookcase, made space in the closet, even brought me a small lamp for the nightstand. Malcolm carried my suitcase up the stairs and joked, "Don't worry, Eleanor. We'll let you out when your sentence is over." I laughed, though the words stung more than I'd ever admit. They said it was temporary, just until I healed. "We're family," Lena said. "Families take care of each other." And I believed her. I wanted to. In those early weeks, I stayed out of the way. I made breakfast quietly before anyone else woke. Tidied the living room. Folded laundry no one had asked me to fold. Walked Mira to the bus stop. Bandaged Callan's skin me. Cooked dinner. No one told me to, not directly, but the silence of gratitude can feel like its own kind of request. Then one morning, I came down to find Malcolm already in the kitchen, eyes fixed on his phone. "Hey, Eleanor," he said without glancing up. "Can you pick up the kids today? Lena's stuck at work and I've got stuff." "No, please." No check to see if I had other plans. Just an assumption that I was free, waiting to be assigned a task. I agreed. Of course I did. And I kept agreeing. Grocery runs. Dry cleaning. Babysitting on short notice. Then came the first utility bill, handed to me with a grin and a casual, "Mind helping out this month?" It sounded like a small favor. And I was still under their roof, still technically recovering, still trying to be grateful. So I paid. Once. Then again. Then it stopped being a question. "You've got your pension," Malcolm reminded me one evening, gesturing at a bill on the table. "It's not like you're paying rent anywhere else." That sentence stayed with me, because in that moment, I realized how they saw me, not as a mother, not as a grandmother, but as a resource. A line item. An opportunity. I kept rationalizing. Told myself they were struggling, that this was what mothers do, what grandmothers do. But the tone of the house had changed. Lena started calling it our space when asking me to lower the volume on the television. Malcolm moved my mail into a drawer so it wouldn't clutter the counter. One afternoon, Callan, 7 years old and honest to a fault, looked up from his crayons and said, "Mom says you're just visiting for a while." Visiting. After more than half a year. I tried to talk to Lena. Picked a quiet afternoon. The kids were at school. Malcolm was out. She was folding laundry on the sofa. I stood nearby, hands clasped. "I was thinking," I said slowly, "maybe I should look for a place of my own again. It's been a while." She paused mid-fold, but didn't meet my eyes. "You don't have to do that," she replied, flat. "We're fine. It's just, things are tight," I murmured. "That's why I thought, Mom, it's not about space," she interrupted. Then added, almost like a rehearsal, "But if you do want to help more with groceries or bills, we wouldn't say no." It wasn't a conversation. It was a transaction. After that, the tension thickened. Conversations shrank. The kitchen no longer felt like mine. My tea bags vanished. Malcolm took to calling me Roomy with a grin that never reached his eyes. And my pension, that modest, dependable check, suddenly became the unspoken centerpiece of every room. I began catching glances between them whenever I reached for my wallet. Malcolm hovering nearby when I checked my bank balance online. Then one afternoon, I returned from the pharmacy to find Lena upstairs at my desk, rifling through papers. I was just tidying, she said casually, not even bothering to hide the folder labeled retirement. I said nothing, just nodded, sat down beside her like nothing had shifted. But something inside me had stiffened, something deep in the chest. A quiet realization. This wasn't about care. It was about control. And I knew then it wouldn't be long before they stopped pretending altogether. The next shift was subtle, as most betrayals are. Not a dramatic rupture. Just the steady chipping away of what once felt safe. It started with the groceries. One morning, I opened the refrigerator and found a sticky note on the milk for the kids, neatly written in Lena's handwriting. Next to it, a separate container of yogurt, unlabeled, store brand, cheap, message received. I didn't argue. I simply began shopping separately, bought my own bread, my own tea, my own milk, stored them in a canvas bag tucked in the lowest fridge drawer. It made me feel ridiculous, like a college student with a shared fridge, not a grandmother who'd raised 2 children and buried a husband. But it kept the peace. Then the children started repeating things they'd overheard. Callan, blunt and wide-eyed, Mom says it's rude to use other people's stuff if you don't help pay. Mira, older now, more cautious, quietly confided, Malcolm said you used to have money, but now you're just staying here for free. Each time I heard something like that, a comment, a whispered remark, a repeated phrase from the children, I felt a small jolt of shame. Not because they were right, but because I hadn't stopped it sooner. The final breaking point with the groceries came when I found my name added to the supermarket rewards account. Malcolm handed me the receipt one evening and said, "You bought stuff, right? Might as well earn points together." The list was almost entirely his: protein powder, imported beer, premium razors. My section totaled $11. The rest, $85, was his. "Just transfer me," he added, tapping the receipt. "I don't use bank apps," I replied. He laughed. "Of course you don't." That night, I lay in bed, eyes on the ceiling, shadows from the fan spinning slow and steady. The heat of early summer pressed through the room, but the anger I felt wasn't warm. It was cold, still, deep. It didn't rise. It settled behind my ribs, solid and unmoving. The next morning, Malcolm made an announcement at breakfast. He was applying for a business grant. Something about custom furniture design. He needed seed money. An investor. "You could help," he said casually, as if it were obvious. "I could," I replied, not committing. "We've helped you," he added, peering over his coffee. "Maybe now you can help us get back on our feet." Lena said nothing. She hummed softly as she spread peanut butter on toast for Callan, like she hadn't heard a thing. I changed the subject. Later that afternoon, I heard them arguing behind their bedroom door. "She's sitting on money. She won't even consider helping. She's my mother, Malcolm. You don't get to order her around." "No, but I get to ask why the hell she's living in our house rent-free while we're drowning in bills." The doors slammed before I could hear more. That evening, Lena came to my room. She didn't sit, just stood by the doorway, arms crossed, the hallway light making her look even more tired than usual. "Mom," she began, "I know it's been tough for all of us. But you do know we're struggling." "I do," I said. "And it's hard," she continued, "when someone in the house has income and isn't contributing." I looked at her a long moment. "I've been buying groceries," I said. "Cooking, cleaning, picking up and dropping off the kids, folding your laundry, mending their clothes, sitting with them when they're sick. What part of that isn't contributing?" She let out a sigh. Not annoyed, just weary. "Malcolm's just trying to build something. Something for our future. And I'm just trying to survive," I replied. That was the first time I saw her flinch. After that, things grew quieter. Conversations were clipped. Smiles felt forced. I started avoiding the kitchen when Malcolm was home. Took longer walks. Kept to my room more often. But the pressure didn't let up. It crystallized into something unmistakable. A demand. One night, after the kids had gone to bed, Malcolm called a family meeting. Lena sat beside him, looking like she hadn't slept in days. We need to talk about expenses, he said. We're behind on rent. Then he turned to me. Eleanor, he said, carefully, you get income every month. Study. More than we do. We think it's fair you start contributing more directly. To rent. I clarified. Yes, he said. To rent. I looked at Lena. She didn't look back. They'd already discussed this. Decided. This wasn't a proposal. It was a verdict. Malcolm leaned forward. We're short. We need your pension. All of it. Just for a few months. And if I say no? I asked quietly. His face didn't move. Then maybe this arrangement isn't working anymore. Still, Lena said nothing. The silence that followed felt endless. I see, I said. I went upstairs, packed what I could into 2 suitcases, and left the rest behind. No one stopped me. I didn't sleep that night. Not truly. I lay on the bed, fully dressed, hands folded over my stomach, the suitcase already zipped and ready by the door. It wasn't fear that kept me awake. Not exactly. It was understanding, sharp and new. They weren't going to stop. Malcolm wasn't going to wake up one morning and realize he'd gone too far. Lena wasn't going to come sit beside me and say, Mom, I'm sorry. I should have stood up for you. That apology was never coming. Not because they were cruel, but because, somewhere along the way, this had become normal to them. The temperature had been rising for months, and I had stayed in the water, telling myself it was just a warm bath. I thought maybe they'd wake up and regret what they'd said. I even hoped, quietly, that Lena might knock on my door, murmur something like, Malcolm didn't mean it. That she'd offer me toast and tea, like she used to on weekend mornings when Mira was a baby and the house smelled of diapers and lavender lotion. But no one knocked. I came downstairs around 8. The kids were already at school. Malcolm sat on the couch, legs sprawled like he was on holiday, scrolling his phone. Lena stood at the kitchen sink, staring out the window like the clouds might whisper the answer she needed. Morning, I said. Malcolm grunted. Lena didn't reply. I made tea, sat at the small table in the kitchen corner, and waited. If they were going to repeat the ultimatum, I wanted to hear it in daylight. Malcolm spoke first. So, he muttered, eyes still glued to his phone. So, I echoed. You going to help or not? He looked up then, just a glance, the kind you'd give a bank teller taking too long with your deposit. Not hostile, just impatient. I sipped my tea. No, I said. Lena turned from the window. This time, her eyes met mine. They were tired. And something else lingered there, shame, maybe, or the dull edge of embarrassment. Malcolm sat up straighter. You serious? Yes. Why? He asked, like the question itself was ridiculous. Like he genuinely couldn't comprehend someone choosing not to bankroll his failure. I've helped plenty, I said. For years. I paid for Myra's daycare when you were between jobs. I bought the car you drive. I co-signed a lease on this house. And since I fell, I've been here every single day cooking, cleaning, watching your kids. That's enough, he scoffed. You act like you're some saint. No, I said calmly. I'm acting like someone who knows the difference between helping and being used. Lena stepped closer, her voice low. Mom, please don't turn this into a fight. I looked at her, really looked. Where were you last night? I asked. While your husband was telling me to hand over my pension or get out? She swallowed. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. We stood there frozen in a silence so heavy I could hear the refrigerator hum and the steady tick of the wall clock. For a moment, I thought Lena might cry. She didn't. Malcolm stood up. If you're not contributing, you can't stay. Simple as that. I nodded. Then I'll go. Tonight. He blinked, caught off guard. Lena opened her mouth, but no words came out. I'll call Marla, I added. She's got a spare room and dignity. Don't be dramatic, Malcolm said. No, I replied. Don't be greedy. I walked upstairs. Each step felt heavier, not with sadness, but with something final. A door closing. A chapter ending. I packed quietly. 2 suitcases. One for clothes. One for everything else. Toiletries, paperwork, reading glasses. The pearl earrings Owen gave me on our 30th anniversary. I left the knitted blanket behind. Let them have it. It had already carried enough of me. As I zipped the last bag, I heard a shuffle outside the door. A shadow paused. Then the sound of footsteps retreating. No knock. No voice. At 5:30, I stepped out of the room. The bags were already downstairs. I'd moved them earlier. Quietly. Without announcement. Neither Malcolm nor Lena asked where I was going. Neither said goodbye. But they did do one thing. While I was at the pharmacy, picking up my prescription refill, they moved my bags out onto the porch. It had started to rain, a steady drizzle. Enough to soak the canvas. When I returned, keys in hand, I found the suitcases sitting side by side, wet, waiting. I knocked. No one came. I rang the bell. Still nothing. I stood for a moment, watching the curtain in the living room shift slightly. Someone was there, watching, but not moving. So I picked up the bags, one in each hand, and walked them down the porch steps. My shoulder ached. My wrist throbbed. But I didn't hurry. I loaded them into the trunk, wiped my glasses, and looked back just once. At the house where my grandchildren were sleeping. At the place where my daughter once told me, "Stay as long as you want." At the home my son-in-law had just erased me from with a shrug. Then I got behind the wheel and drove away. It's strange, the things that pass through your mind when everything comes undone. How heavy a suitcase feels after just a few steps. How fast rain seeps through canvas. How a porch you once swept clean every Saturday can suddenly look like someone else's stoop. Like a hotel you've been checked out of without notice. I didn't cry on the drive. Not during that short stretch to Marla's house. I kept my hands locked on the wheel, knuckles pale, breath steady. 1 mile, I whispered to myself. Just get through 1 mile. Then the next. Her porch light was already on. She must have been watching for me. When she opened the door, she didn't say a word, just reached out and held me. And that was the moment I let it all go. I didn't think she'd let it happen. I murmured into her shoulder. I thought maybe she'd stop him. "I know, sweetheart," Marla said, holding me the way my mother used to. "I know." We didn't speak much that night. She brought out towels for the bags, damp around the zippers. Made us both tea. Chamomile. The good kind, not the bargain bin brand. I cradled the mug in my hands, watching the steam rise like a ribbon. It took nearly an hour for the shivering in my body to fade. "I've got the spare room ready," she said softly. "It's small, but the bed's firm. And the heat works." "It's perfect," I told her. And it was. There were no scented candles. No stage decor. Just warmth. A blanket folded neatly at the foot of the bed, a soft lamp glowing beside it, and something I hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet sense that I was allowed to exist, fully, without guilt or negotiation. I sat on the edge of the mattress for a long while before changing. My nightgown was still damp at the hem, so I slipped into an old sweatshirt and borrowed a pair of socks from Marla's drawer, light gray, dotted with tiny stars. Lying there in the dark, I kept thinking, they really did it. Malcolm had threatened it more than once, but Lena, I hadn't believed she'd go along. That she'd stand in the living room, silent, while I stood at the door with soaked shoulders and packed bags. That she'd let me knock. And be ignored. But she had. And once you know what someone's capable of, you don't unknow it. The next morning, I woke early. My body ached, but my mind was clear, sharper than it had been in weeks. Clarity has a way of creeping in after storms. It doesn't shout. It settles. I sat at Marla's kitchen table while she made eggs, and I began listing things in my head, my pension account, the bank login I hadn't checked in over a month, medical records still tucked in a folder at Lena's house, now inaccessible. My will. "I need to get my paperwork in order," I said aloud. Marla didn't ask why. "Whatever you need," she said, sliding scrambled eggs onto my plate. "I'll help." By midday, we were at my bank. I sat across from a young advisor named Devin. Polite. Slightly nervous. "I'd like to change all authorizations on my accounts," I told him. "All of them?" he asked. "Yes. Everything. No one should have access but me." I'd forgotten how easy it was to reclaim something. Devin walked me through the forms. I read each line, signed each page slowly, deliberately. When we finished, he printed a fresh statement and looked up. Is there anything else I can help you with today? Yes, I said. I want to start a trust account for my granddaughter. Just her. No one else. Nora, 11 years old. Still soft-eyed. Still kind. Still mine in the ways that mattered. I want it structured to protect her, I added. No parental access. Delayed release. He nodded. We can absolutely set that up. After the bank, I called an attorney. Fiona Darrow. She'd handled Owen's will years ago and still kept an office downtown, her assistant as precise as ever. Fiona, I said when she answered. It's Eleanor Hensley. I need to update some documents. She didn't ask why. Just replied, tomorrow. 10 o'clock. That evening, I sat again in Marla's spare room, this time with a notepad in my lap. I started writing everything I'd paid for over the past few years. Lena's car. Malcolm's failed landscaping project. Nora's tablet. Callan's orthodontist. Groceries. Rent. Christmas presents. Plane tickets for their last vacation, charged to my account. 27 line items in total. I didn't write them down out of spite, though the bitterness was there. I wrote them down because I needed to see it, to stop pretending it had been a shared life. I closed the notebook and promised myself no more. No more silent giving. No more hoping my sacrifices would earn me warmth. No more letting guilt write the checks. I had given enough. Now I needed to protect what was left. Fiona greeted me at the door of her office with the same calm steadiness she'd always had. Her trousers were pressed, her linen blouse crisp, her silver hair pinned back in the same tortoiseshell clip she'd worn since the early 2000s. You look well, Eleanor, she said gently, though we both knew better. I sat across from her at the polished oak desk. The office smelled faintly of lavender lotion and warm printer ink. I need to make changes, I told her. To everything. She nodded. Power of attorney revoked. Immediately. The will rewritten. I want my granddaughter, Nora, as sole beneficiary. Not Lena. Not Malcolm. She didn't flinch. Just reached for a pen and pulled a legal pad closer. Trust account? She asked. Yes. Structured, restricted. No access until she's older. And no loopholes for her parents. Fiona made a note. And the house. I paused. That detail still stung. Technically, it wasn't mine. I'd helped fund the down payment, but the deed was in their names. A quiet concession I'd once told myself didn't matter. There's nothing to reclaim there, I said. But everything else, I want protected. She looked up. This isn't about revenge, is it? No, I said. It's about correction. She smiled faintly. Good. For the next hour, we moved through old files and new forms, documents I hadn't touched in years. Owen had always kept our records spotless. After he passed, I maintained them out of routine. Until now, I hadn't realized that order could be power, or that silence could be legal consent. When we finished, Fiona placed the updated drafts into a folder embossed with my name. You'll come back next week to sign the full version. But the account authorizations, we can finalize those today. Do it, I said. As I stepped out into the afternoon sun, the folder tucked under my arm, I felt something I hadn't in months. Lighter. Not free. Not yet. But grounded, anchored in something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Back at Marlowe's, I sat at the kitchen table and told her everything. She didn't interrupt. Just refilled my tea and nodded when appropriate. They're going to call, I said. Eventually. When they realize. Marla raised an eyebrow. And? I'm not answering. That evening, the phone buzzed. First Lena. Then Malcolm. Then Lena again. No voicemails. Just missed calls, one after the other. I turned the phone face down. They didn't know yet. Not entirely. But they were beginning to feel it. Silence, after all, can be its own message. The next morning, a knock came at the door. It wasn't them. It was a courier. He handed me a single manila envelope, no return address. Inside, a handwritten letter. Mom, I don't know what happened. I know you're hurt. I know Malcolm can be difficult. But this is family. We're supposed to help each other. You've been part of this house, part of our lives. The kids miss you. I miss you. Please call me. Lena, no apology. No mention of the bags on the porch in the rain. No acknowledgement of what she'd stood by and allowed. I folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope. Not to read again. Not to destroy. Just to put it away, where it belonged. In the past. Marla walked into the room and sat beside me. She didn't ask what was in the envelope. Instead, she said, "Have you thought about where you'll go next?" I nodded. I want a place of my own. Small. Quiet. Mine. No more shared keys. No more sloped ceilings and borrowed corners. No more waiting for permission to exist. She raised her teacup to that. We clinked them gently, like women who had bent around others for too long and finally remembered how to stand straight. That night, I opened the notebook again, the one with the list. I drew a line under the last entry. Then, in bold letters, I wrote, "No more asking. No more waiting. No more silence." I closed the notebook. Tomorrow, I'd find an apartment. Tonight, I'd sleep without fear. The apartment wasn't fancy. A one-bedroom on the second floor of an aging building with beige carpeting from the 1970s and kitchen cabinets that groaned if you opened them too fast. But the windows caught the afternoon light. The neighbors were quiet. And no one told me what temperature to keep the thermostat. It was mine. I signed a lease the same week Fiona finalized the documents. The property manager, a kind woman named Letitia, handed me a set of keys and a folder of emergency contacts. Then she leaned in slightly and said with a smile, "If you want to hang up wind chimes on the balcony, I won't say a word." I laughed a real laugh. The kind I hadn't heard from myself in weeks. The move was simple. I didn't own much. 2 suitcases. A few boxes of books Marla helped me pack. The notebook. My papers. And one framed photograph, Owen and me at the Grand Canyon. One of our last vacations together. He wore a floppy hat I hated and a grin that reached every edge of him. I placed the photo on the windowsill in the bedroom. Then I stood back and stared at it. "We did okay," I whispered. "You'd have liked this place. It's quiet. No one shouts. No one demands." The first night felt strange. Not lonely, not exactly. I'd felt lonelier in a house full of people, but quiet in a way that lets things rise to the surface. I sat on the floor surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and made tea with the kettle Marla lent me. She'd offered to help set up, but I'd told her I needed to do this part alone. As the kettle hissed, I made a list in my mind. Things I needed. Things I wouldn't ask anyone to buy for me. Things I'd gather slowly on my time. A proper bed. A reading lamp. A dish rack. A matching towel set. A chair for the balcony. I slept on the floor that night, curled in a folded blanket. And still, I woke up with a clearer head than I'd had in months. The next day, I walked to the library. Got a new card with my address on it. Sat at a public computer and filled out change of address forms. Noted what still needed forwarding. Looked up nearby secondhand furniture shops. At the first one, I found a worn sea-green armchair. Its arms were smooth, the seat soft and faded. The kind of chair that had already held a life. They delivered it that afternoon. I placed it near the window, sat down, and opened a new notebook. Not the one with the sacrifices. I was done with that. This one had a fresh cover. A clean start. On the first page, I wrote, "What comes next?" Then I began, "I will have dinner when I choose. I will leave dishes in the sink without explanation. I will buy strawberries even when they're not on sale. I will say no and mean it. I will never again explain why my money belongs to me." Around noon, the first message arrived. "Lena, Mom, I heard from the bank. I don't understand why you're cutting us off. Can we talk?" I stared at the message on my screen for a long time. Then I powered the phone off. I hadn't blocked Lena. Not yet, but I needed the quiet. The next message wasn't from her. It came from Nora. Simple. Honest. "Grandma, are you okay? Mom says you're mad. I miss you." My chest ached, not with guilt, but with something softer. Nora hadn't done anything wrong. She was just a child. 11. But old enough to feel the change in the air. Old enough to notice a voice gone missing in the house. Old enough to worry. I didn't answer immediately. I sat with her message like it was made of glass. Then I wrote back, "I'm okay, sweet pea. I needed a new place to rest." I'll call you soon. That was all. Just enough. That night, I sat on my new balcony in my new chair, wrapped in a sweater, listening to the sounds of a world I didn't have to fix. A faint radio playing somewhere 2 floors down. A dog barking once, then going quiet. Someone's laughter drifting through an open window. The hum of life without responsibility, without expectation, without me. I sipped my tea and watched the moon rise between the dark branches of an old oak across the street. No one waiting, no one watching, no one demanding answers. It wasn't freedom with fanfare. It was freedom like an exhale. And for now, that was everything. Fiona had everything ready when I arrived at her office. The paperwork was organized, sectioned, and tabbed in colored markers. I sat across from her, this time dressed deliberately, clean lines, muted colors, nothing borrowed, nothing apologetic. "You've had a productive week," she said, offering a soft smile. "I needed it," I replied. She walked me through the changes. The revocation of power of attorney, the updated healthcare directive, a fully rewritten will, the trust for Nora solid, clear, protected. "She'll get access at 25, Fiona said, tapping a clause. "No earlier. Only she can claim it. No proxies. No parental reach." "Good," I said. We reviewed the financial protections next, my pension, now locked down with new security, my lease, utilities, and accounts, all solely in my name. "You've built a clean slate," Fiona said, sliding the final page across the desk. I signed without pause. When it was done, I sat back and let the quiet settle in. "That's it?" I asked. "That's it," she confirmed. "No one can touch what's yours now." I didn't cry. The relief wasn't loud. It was quiet and deep, like the soft sound of a door clicking shut behind you for good. Afterward, I walked to the bakery nearby, bought myself a cinnamon bun and a coffee, sat at a window table and let the sugar melt on my tongue. Outside, people moved forward. Young mothers pushing strollers, men in shirt sleeves eating lunch, a teenager with pink headphones dancing to music no one else could hear. Life didn't pause to notice me, but I was noticing it for the first time in a long time. Back at the apartment, I began to build a rhythm. Tea in the morning on the balcony, a walk around the block, calls to Marla, sometimes silence, sometimes knitting with the news low in the background. I hadn't picked up my needle since Owen passed, but now my fingers ached for it. I started with something simple, a scarf. Soft yarn, pale blue. I didn't know who it would be for. Maybe just for me. Every few days, a new message from Lena. "Can we please talk? We didn't mean to hurt you. Nora's asking questions." I didn't reply, not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't ready. Letting her back in without real change would undo everything I'd just done. Nora wrote again. "Hi, Grandma. Mom says you moved. I hope you're safe. I love you." That one I answered. "I'm safe, sweetheart. I love you too. I'll call you soon. I promise." And I meant it. But I also meant to do it on my own terms. A week passed, then another. On the 15th day in my new place, I went grocery shopping. Simple things: bread, eggs, butter, marmalade. At checkout, the clerk smiled as she handed me the receipt. And it hit me, I'd made it through the entire trip without once thinking about what Malcolm would criticize or what Lena would label as unnecessary. In the parking lot, I watched a mother gently scolding her teenager. Not cruel, just tired. I thought of Lena, barefoot in my old kitchen, stirring pasta with Nora on her hip and Callan drawing beneath the table. She hadn't started with cruelty. That came later. It began with stress. And I had excused the harm because of it again and again. But not anymore. That night, I lit a candle, sat at the table, and wrote a letter to Nora. A real one on paper, in careful cursive. "Sweetheart, I've moved into a quiet little apartment where I can breathe and think and rest. It's not far, but it's very different. No shouting, no demands. Just me, my tea, and some yarn that keeps tingling. I miss you. I'm proud of you. And I want you to remember, being kind doesn't mean letting people hurt you. I'll call soon. And maybe one day you'll visit. Not because you're told to, but because you want to. Love always. Grandma, I sealed the letter and addressed it carefully. Then I placed it near the door. In the morning, I'd mail it. That would be enough for now. On the third Sunday in my new place, I made soup. Simple: carrots, potatoes, a little onion, a pinch of dill. The kind of thing Owen used to call survival food with a wink, though he always asked for seconds. I cooked it slowly, letting the scent fill the kitchen, trail down the hallway, seep beneath the bedroom door like warmth returning. While it simmered, I put on an old record. The needle scratched faintly, and then Etta James sang like she knew what it meant to start over at 73. I didn't dance, not quite, but I let my body sway gently as I folded the dish towel. My feet moved. That was enough. It wasn't just the soup or the music. It was the silence that wrapped around me. Not the strained quiet from Lena's house, thick with judgment and unspoken resentments. This silence was soft, earned. It welcomed me. That afternoon, Marla called. "You up for a walk?" she asked. "I've got shortbread and a thermos of tea." "I'll be there in 20, I said. Her street was 3 blocks down, a gentle incline my knees didn't love but could still handle. I took my time. The breeze was brisk, but the sun was kind. I passed a couple walking hand in hand. A woman with a corgi. A boy on a scooter who gave me a wide berth without being told. I'd forgotten how courteous the world could be when no one was watching to criticize it. Marla had set up a little bench in her garden with cushions and a throw blanket like it was a grand occasion. "Thought we'd celebrate your first month of freedom," she said, handing me a cup. "It's not quite a month," I replied. "Close enough," she grinned. We sat there, sipping and nibbling, saying very little. I told her about the scarf I'd started knitting. She told me about her neighbor's son, recently engaged to a girl from Minnesota with a laugh like a church bell. It felt good being near someone who expected nothing from me. At one point, Marla turned and asked, "Do you miss them?" I didn't pretend not to know who she meant. "Sometimes," I said. "Not the house, not the tension, but Lena, the kids." She nodded. "And sometimes," I added, "I wonder if I should have spoken up earlier. Not let it get so far." She gave me that look. The one only old friends can give. The kind that says, "Don't you dare start blaming yourself now. You did what you had to do," she said. "And when it became too much, you did what was right." I didn't reply, just sipped my tea. When I returned home, I found a package by the door. No return label. Just my name in Nora's handwriting, crooked, uneven, beautiful. Inside, a drawing. A little house. A tree beside it. A woman on the porch. At the top, in bold letters, "Grandma's house from the window, a speech bubble. Do you want tea?" I held it for a long time. Then I placed it on the fridge, using the only magnet I owned, a ceramic strawberry from a church fundraiser nearly 2 decades ago. It held firm. That night, I didn't knit. I didn't read. I just sat in my green chair by the window and looked at that drawing. Let it sit with me. Let it be enough. Because sometimes enough isn't a grand moment. Sometimes it's a little girl's drawing on a fridge in a quiet apartment. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, just as I was setting down a plate of toast beside my tea. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew. I let it ring twice, then 3 more times. Then I picked up. "Hello." There was a pause. Then his voice. "Hi, Eleanor. Malcolm." I hadn't heard his voice since that morning on the porch when my suitcases were already damp and he wouldn't open the door. My shoulders tightened, but my voice stayed calm. "What do you want?" He cleared his throat. "I just thought maybe we could talk." I waited. I know things got tense. I wasn't at my best. I was under a lot of pressure. We both were. "I see," I said. I thought maybe we could fix things. Janine's been upset. Nora, too." I let the silence settle. I'd learned how to hold it now. "Finally," he added, "she's been asking about you." "I'm not the one who locked a door on her grandmother." He didn't respond. "Malcolm," I said, "I'm not interested in apologies that sound like excuses." Another pause. "Well, if you change your mind, I won't." And I hung up. I didn't move right away. My hands were steady, but my chest felt hollow, like the air had shifted in the room. I stood by the window and watched the sun slide across the building across the street. Then I sat down and ate my toast. An hour later, the phone rang again. Nora. I answered before the second ring. Hi, Grandma. Hi, sweetheart. Nora's voice was softer than usual, the kind of whisper you use when you've crept somewhere private to make a call. I got your letter. I'm glad. There was a pause. Can I visit you? I hesitated, not because I didn't want her. I wanted her more than anything. But I knew what that visit would mean. I knew it might come with questions. And I knew the reasons wouldn't be tidy. Do your parents know you're calling? I asked. Not this time, she said, barely above a whisper. But I told Mom I missed you. She didn't say no. That said everything. All right, I said. You can visit. But only if it's your choice, not theirs. I want to, she replied instantly. Can I come this weekend? Just for a little while? I smiled, a real one. Yes. I'll make apple pie, the kind with the cinnamon crust. She laughed. Can I help roll the dough? Of course. We hung up not long after. I sat back in my chair, eyes drifting to the drawing still pinned to the fridge. Grandma's house. A tree. A cup of tea. That night, I made a list. Fresh apples. Brown sugar. Whipping cream. Vanilla. And a new apron for Nora, something with deep pockets. I went to bed early. Left the window cracked, even though the air had a chill to it. I wanted the night to come in. Saturday would come soon. And this time, the knock on the door wouldn't be one I dreaded. It would be the sound of love arriving, by choice. The morning of Nora's visit, I woke before the sun. Not out of nerves, something gentler. Anticipation. The kind that moves you before the alarm, before the kettle hums, before the city stirs. I'd set up a cot in the corner, simple but warm. A folded mattress. A soft blanket. A new pillow I'd bought 2 days before. It wasn't about luxury. It was about her knowing she was welcome. I started with the pie crust, too, just in case. By 9 a.m., the apartment smelled of cinnamon and butter. I opened the window so the scent could greet the morning air. Letitia, the building manager, passed by on her way to the office and smiled up from the sidewalk. Someone's baking love, she called. I waved back. At 10:45, I heard light footsteps on the stairs. Then the knock. When I opened the door, there she was, Nora, tall for her age, sweatshirt hanging past her fingertips, hair tucked behind one ear. Her backpack looked heavier than she did. A few steps behind, Lena stood with folded arms. She didn't come closer. Hi, Nora said. I opened the door wide. Come in, sweetheart. She stepped inside, eyes darting around. It's small, she said. It is. But it's mine. She smiled. Lena didn't follow. I'll pick her up at 5, she said flatly. I nodded, then closed the door. We stood in the small kitchen for a moment, just looking at each other. Do you want tea? I asked. She grinned. You really do say that all the time. We sat at the table, 2 mugs, steam curling between us. I didn't rush her. Let her eyes move around. The framed photo of Owen on the windowsill. Her drawing still pinned to the fridge. The basket of yarn beneath the chair. Did you really knit that? She asked, pointing to the half-finished scarf. I did. Slower than I used to be. It's pretty. We talked about school. About how Callan had taken her spot on the couch. About the neighbor's dog who barked every morning like a clock. She told me she hated math but loved her teacher's earrings. Then she went quiet. Mom sat a lot. Since you left. I nodded. She says you just walked out. I took a breath. I didn't walk out, sweetheart. I was pushed. Gently, maybe, but pushed. She nodded slowly. I kind of thought that. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. You don't have to choose sides, I said. Just remember, no one gets to treat people like they're replaceable. Not even family. She blinked. That's what it felt like. Like they were using you. I gave her fingers a soft squeeze. That's why I left. After a moment, she whispered, I'm glad you did. I stood and walked to the counter. Now, let's make pie. She rolled the dough with careful precision, tongue poking out like Lena used to do when she was little. She sliced the apples confidently, mixed the sugar and cinnamon with a seriousness that made me smile. Once we slid the pie into the oven, she dropped into the chair with a dramatic sigh. Baking is hard. Only the first 100 times. We ate lunch on the balcony, sandwiches, a handful of grapes, and 2 slices of warm pie. This is better than the store kind, she declared. I didn't argue. At 4:45, her phone buzzed. Mom's outside. She stood slowly. At the door, she turned and hugged me tightly. I want to come again, she said into my sweater. You always can. She walked down the steps, turned at the bottom, and waved. I waved back. When the door closed behind her, the quiet returned. But this time, it was the good kind. The kind of quiet that meant something had been healed, if only just a little. A week passed after Chloe's visit. Then another. The pie plate sat in the drying rack for 3 days before I finally tucked it away, not because I forgot, but because I wanted it visible. A reminder that something sweet had happened. That it could happen again. Life in the apartment resumed its soft rhythm. Morning tea. Reading by the window. A new knitting project, a pale green blanket, slow-going, steady. I'd chosen the color without a second thought, and only after a few rows realized it matched the sweater Chloe wore when she visited. Her texts started coming more often. Short and bright, math test, B+. Grandma magic. Mom says hi. I told her to write it herself. Can I come back next Saturday? I always answered. Always yes. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I returned from the market to find a single folded paper slid beneath my door. No envelope. Just the edge of it peeking out from the floor like it didn't want to be seen. I knew the handwriting before I touched it. Janine. I set my bag down, brewed tea, let it steep far too long. I wanted to be ready. The letter was short. Not dramatic, but real. Mom, I've been thinking about what happened, about what I let happen. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't know if I would forgive me either. But I miss you. I miss the way the house used to feel when you were there. The kids miss you too. Kurt doesn't say anything, but I can tell he hasn't touched the thermostat in weeks. Chloe came home glowing. She keeps the pie recipe in her school binder. I know I didn't stop things when I should have. I stood by. I let it happen. I don't know how to fix that. But I wanted you to know I see it now. I read it twice, then folded it slowly, carefully, and placed it next to Chloe's drawing on the fridge. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a request. But it was the first honest thing I'd heard from Janine in a very long time. That evening, I sat out on the balcony, blanket across my knees, tea in hand. The sun dipped behind the buildings across the street. Leaves rustled, not loud, just enough. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I thought about what it meant to forgive, not to excuse, not to forget, but to give myself peace. To unclench the breath I'd been holding since the day I walked out. I didn't know if I was ready to write back. But I knew this. I wasn't angry anymore. And maybe that was enough for now. The second time Chloe visited, she brought cookies she'd baked herself. A dozen crumbling, half-hard things in a plastic sandwich bag. They're kind of bad, she said, laughing. Danny said they taste like soap, but he still ate 5. We tried one together. It was, indeed, kind of soapy. But I smiled. He's just jealous. She grinned. That wide, unfiltered grin. The front gap in her teeth still hadn't closed. She looked proud. She stayed longer this time. We didn't bake. We didn't need to. We just were. She asked about the scarf I'd been knitting. Told me about a friend at school who wore purple eyeshadow and didn't care what anyone thought. I think I want to be like that, she said. You already are, I replied. When Janine came to pick her up, she didn't wait on the stairs this time. She climbed all the way up and stood at the door. Her arms were crossed, but not defensively, just unsure. I opened it before she could knock. Hi, she said. Hi, I replied. She looked past me, saw Chloe packing up her things, then back at me. I meant what I wrote, she said. Anne, I'm sorry. For all of it. I nodded. I know. She hesitated, then added, if you ever want to stop by, just to visit. The kids would like that. I'll think about it, I said, and I did mean that. I wasn't ready to promise. But I wasn't shutting the door either. Chloe hugged me twice before leaving. Janine didn't push for anything more. They walked down the steps together, and I stayed at the threshold, watching them disappear around the corner. Then I closed the door, quietly, calmly. That night, I opened the old notebook, the one with the list. Every errand, every bill paid, every ride, every sleepless night, the things I'd done and the silence I'd endured. I read it one last time, then tore the page out, folded it small, and dropped it into the trash bin. It landed softly on top of an eggshell and a used tea bag. Gone. Then I turned the page and wrote something new. I am still here. And I have enough. Because I did. I wasn't wealthy. My knees ached every time it rained. I lived above a laundromat that shook the walls every Thursday afternoon. But I had a quiet place to call my own. I had Ruthie. And I had a granddaughter who knew her grandmother deserved better. And that was more than enough. I had something now that no one could twist into shame. A name spoken without pity. And silence, real silence. Not exile. Not emptiness. Just peace. To anyone reading this, if you've ever been asked to shrink yourself so someone else could feel bigger, I want you to hear this. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe them your pension. You don't owe them space at a table where you were never offered a seat. Stand up, even if your knees ache, even if your voice trembles, even if it's raining and your bags are soaked through. Stand up, because the first step away from being used is the first step toward being free. And freedom, real, grounded freedom, doesn't always arrive like a battle cry. Sometimes it comes quietly. It's a cup of tea on your own balcony. It's a warm pie cooling on a borrowed wire rack. It's a child knocking at your door, not out of duty, but love. It's your own breath steady, your own walls safe, your own name, fully yours again. Sometimes freedom is simply this, you, still standing, still whole, still here. And that at long last is enough. Sweetheart, don't forget to subscribe and leave me a little note in the comments. I love hearing from you.